Okay, Bluebirds, Niitaniko cut jaw, and welcome back to my channel. This video is going to be what I would like to call a learning video, so to speak, for the viewers as well as myself. There are several points that I'm going to discuss, including vital information that most people either missed or just didn't address about my video on Jesse Washington, as well as the wonderful intrusion of an entitled Karen who felt the need to disrespect my ancestor. And the latter situation is a classic discussion for any Caucasian viewers who may be watching. The most popular video I've uploaded is the one discussing the lynching of Jesse Washington, a relative on my father's side of the family. If you haven't watched that video yet, you probably should because it contextualizes everything I'm about to say. Firstly, I'm going to address the general response to the video, then I'll get into the part with the entitled Karen. Now, the overwhelming majority of viewers of this particular video were very supportive, respectful, and encouraging toward me as I shared a very intimate and severe story of a family trauma which I am vastly grateful for. I know that the story of Jesse Washington's lynching is an official part of American history, so many people who are aware of this story, regardless of their ethnicity, might not necessarily consider it to be a sensitive story for the descendants of Jesse Washington, but it is. The majority of the people who gained access to this video, either because they conscientiously searched for Jesse Washington or lynching and the video just came up in the results, or because it was recommended from another video, were Black. When I say Black, I mean the African descendants of slaves brought to the North American continent through the transatlantic slave trade. People who, aside from the natives who were already here, are the only immigrant group who were brought here against their will, who belong here. America belongs to Native Americans and the African descendants of slaves only. But anyway, I mention this for this reason. No one directly acknowledged, either through email or through the comment section itself, how I maintained that Jesse Washington was an indigenous man. Now, a lot of people who did actually hear this might have thought that I meant that he was of African descent with some native blood. But in actuality, I meant the opposite. Jesse Washington was an indigenous man with some African blood, not the other way around. And I just know that I've triggered someone this now by saying that. But really, why is this something so hard to believe? Oh, because most of you believe lies that Caucasian people have pushed, that anyone with brown skin automatically comes from Africa, right? Or because you believe yet more Caucasian-induced lies that Native Americans were Euro-Asian with pale skin and blonde hair and blue eyes, right? Or because you actually believe that most of the Mexican and Caucasians on reservations masquerading as Native Americans are the real deal, yes? Now, I'm not at all in the slightest bit upset or anything with the people in the comment section who still believe that Jesse Washington was a Black man. I understand that we all have been socially conditioned to believe whatever the powers that be want us to believe. For over a century, this is what the history books written by Caucasians tell us, that Jesse Washington was a Black man. And even those few history books that are, by chance, written and or published by an indigenous or ADOS individual still echoes the same lie as the Caucasian publications. I found it quite interesting how everyone in the comment section kept referring to Jesse as a Black man, despite how I had explicitly stated more than once that he was from the Waco tribe, a local tribe in the area. The city of Waco itself is named after the Waco tribe. The way the name is spelled just changed. But I blame indigenous people for this. We don't challenge colonial thought enough. We really don't. We allowed ourselves to be colonized by a minority group we outnumbered by millions. Some may argue as to why this is even a topic at all. I'll tell you why. Because both indigenous people and ADOS heavily believe Caucasian propaganda. Neither of us really know who we are. There are indigenous people who think they're from Africa. and who are therefore allowing Caucasians to take our place, metaphorically and literally, because again, most of the people who live on reservations today aren't Native American at all. There are also Black people who think they are part Native when they're actually completely Native and are more indigenous than the liars who show up at the powwow. I also say all this to prove a critical point. Native Americans were, and still are, melanated. Stop mindlessly following Caucasian sources and the sources of those who side with them who tell you who you are. I know who I am. I'm a deeply melanated indigenous woman of the Blackfoot tribe. But Caucasians see me and want to say I'm Black because they want to control the narrative. And most people also believe this. Let me make something very clear. Indigenous people in ADOS, despite being of different ethnic groups, share the same pulse, so I'm never upset when a Black person assumes I'm Black too, because I understand that this is simply due to social conditioning. We are different, but very much the same. We both have been adversely affected by colonialization. We both have experienced having our histories rewritten by colonizers. Caucasians actually try to pit us against one another, and we both share phenotypical similarities. Native Americans, had and still have dark brown skin, big noses, full lips, thick and curly hair, just like African people. I know there's intense debate going on about indigenous people being of African descent and vice versa, and there are some who believe that a melanated person claiming to be native just doesn't want to associate with Africa, but that's not true. Let me tell you something. Africa is the motherland, period. All life started in Africa. If I really was African, I would be walking around with it printed on a t-shirt. But I'm not doing that because I cannot trace my roots to Africa, and no one in my family has ever been able to. My great-grandmother was 100% Choctaw. I have a great-uncle on my mother's side of the family who was born on a reservation, and his skin tone was so dark it was almost the color black. You see, what most of society doesn't seem to want to come to terms with is that most of planet Earth is melanated. Most nations are melanated. Even communities notorious for having an aversion to melanated skin are still naturally tan themselves, such as the Asian community, for instance. Most Asians are born with varying degrees of melanin in their skin and have either a slight tan or deeply melanated brown skin. What needs to be understood is that brown skin is a natural color. It is the color of the earth. Think about a rainforest. What blends in best with the environment? An individual with yellow hair and pale skin the color of paper, or a brown-skinned individual with dark brown eyes and dark brown hair? Melanin is a rich, advantageous skin tone that reflects the very world around us, nature itself. So this is why everyone with brown skin isn't necessarily of African origin, because most people of the world, excluding Caucasians and a few Asian communities, are enriched with melanin to various extents. Now I'm going to move on to the part of this discussion that I consider a learning experience, specifically for Caucasians who voluntarily choose to consume my content and get angry at unadulterated realism. This concerns comments made by a Caucasian woman who had no business even commenting on the video, let alone watching it to begin with. If I am to be frank, I very much wish there was some kind of way to prevent those with white supremacist ideologies from accessing my content, but I unfortunately can't do that. The only exception to this would be if we somehow made a site for indigenous people that mainstream society didn't know about, but that, to my knowledge, doesn't exist yet. So it's only a matter of time before I have to deal with a butthurt Caucasian. So the Caucasian woman in question, Miss Tammy C., made two comments on the Jesse Washington video. The first, as you can see, was saying how terrible the event was, and then in the same breath, she turns around and makes a second comment about how I'm a racist for calling out her people's barbarism. Guess what? No one else from any other race has been known throughout history to habitually, and I say habitually because Jesse Washington wasn't the one and only lynching in the history of the world. But only Caucasians took people for no real reason and burned them, dismembered them, tore off their genitals and shoved it down their throat. Only white people did that. Remember, these are the same people who conducted gladiator shows, which were live murder shows purely for entertainment purposes. Sellouts never did anything like this. Africans never did this. Even Asian people, who are also largely racist and have white supremacist ideologies ingrained in their culture, never did this to indigenous or black people. Only Caucasians. So calling Caucasians barbaric is a known fact, not an act of discrimination, Miss Tammy C. Now, the comment Tammy C made, calling me a racist, she deleted it herself, probably because she realized it contradicted the false persona of being an ally she was trying to put forth. Although the comment was deleted, it still showed up in my video statistics. Sometimes I read the comments, sometimes I don't. But how can you, in one breath, say a lynching is terrible and then turn around and call the person making a video, sharing a sensitive personal trauma such as a terrible lynching, a racist for doing so? See, I don't mind Caucasians, or anyone else for that matter, calling me a racist because, first of all, indigenous people can't be racist. We lack the social infrastructure to do so. We don't even have sovereignty over our own land, so how in the world can we be racist? But when it specifically comes to Caucasians, anytime a remotely ethnic person addresses white supremacy, that ethnic person is called racist because white fragility and white privilege warp most Caucasians' view of reality. Tammy C., who clearly isn't an ally for indigenous people, black people, or any other ethnic person, represents the majority of Caucasians. For one thing, she, like most Caucasians, is obsessed with black people. Caucasians are obsessed with indigenous people, and black people specifically. And interestingly enough, both groups are the same groups that have been terrorized the most by them. You want to know how I know this? Because the only way for someone to gain access to my video on Jesse Washington is either because it showed up in their recommendations based on the content they were already watching, because they searched for lynching, or because they searched for Jesse Washington. So what this means is that this Caucasian woman, who isn't an ally and doesn't genuinely care about the indigenous struggle, or the black struggle, or any struggle, and who openly acts out of white fragility and white privilege, casually searches on YouTube about lynching in her spare time. If she hadn't been so deluded, maybe she would have taken 3 seconds to check my description box and discovered that I'm also a Native American social activist working toward decolonization. You would be a fool to believe that such an individual would talk about a brutal family lynching and actually have something good to say about Caucasians afterward. The statement she made, calling me a racist, did not hurt my feelings. I mean, I couldn't care less about what the descendants of settlers and colonizers think of me. That's not why I deleted and muted her. Those of you who watched the video to the end will recall that I plainly made it clear that if you say or do anything that I believe disrespects Jesse Washington's memory, your commentary would be deleted and you would be blocked. I felt that given the context of her statement and the fact that she voluntarily chose to make a disrespectful comment on this video, of all the videos I have posted right now, I believe disrespected Jesse's memory. So she was blocked and her content deleted. Given this, there was no way that the first statement she gave could have been sincere. Why cease searching up lynchings if she can't handle the truth bewilders me, but again, Tammy C. represents the overwhelming majority of Caucasians, not just here in America, but around the world. So let this be a teachable moment for the melanated, non-white supremacist people watching this video. You don't really have any white friends. Even the ones who say nice things to your face still have their thinking saturated with white supremacist ideology, and if you call it out, they'll call you a racist because you wounded their white fragility. Even the ones smiling in your face don't ultimately mean you well. I dealt with forms of this in grade school, high school, and now as an adult. Very few Caucasians can handle the truth. Actually, the Caucasian woman who commented on the video before Tammy C, took no issue with the things I said in the video, but most Caucasians just don't feel that way. This is also a warning to obsessed Caucasians simultaneously operating within the entitlement that comes with white privilege as well as white fragility. If you can't deal with the reality of things like white supremacy and how your people have largely benefited from genocide, slavery, and colonization, what are you even doing on my channel to begin with? My content isn't for you. Now, I can't stop you from being here, but I promise that if you step out of line, I'll handle you like Tammy C, and will send the spirits of my ancestors to deal with you. You don't have to agree with me, you don't have to like me, but you will respect me, especially my ancestors. See, you didn't disrespect me, Tammy C. You disrespected Jesse. Now, I'm not going to talk about this too much longer because I've already said anything that needs to be said, and if anyone feels a certain way about this video, click the thumbs down button and go away because just don't waste your time whining in the comment section. I'm here to decolonize and vibe with those with similar ideologies. Ultimately, I'm here to get my family's land back. I'm not here to make friends. And definitely not with anyone who wants to lick the boot of white supremacy. So with that being said, I'm cut, y'all. This is the Bone Thread, and I'll see you all in the next video. Or maybe not.